Leslie, welcome to Easy Conversations. Really
Thanks for
looking
having me,
forward
brother.
to, yeah, absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to have you here and learn about your work. I think your story is very inspirational. And the brief moment I had with you to chat last time, I was able to figure out you're a very deep thinker and you've obviously met a lot of people and we've talked about archetypes, but really want to understand from your perspective what working the animal means and why you thought that would be something of value to write about and share with the world, and obviously share your personal experiences in all the work you've done and learned through your journey. So I know we'll get into all of that, but before we do, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today.
Okay, where to start? I am a musician from almost the lowest part of Alabama that you can drive to. I'm just a little ways north of Gulf Shores and grew up here. I love a ton about Southern culture. I also feel like I need to apologize for some of Southern culture. I've been fortunate enough to see quite a bit of the world and meet people from all different places and physical places and mental places, some that are thriving, some that are struggling. I've seen the human condition in front of me.
Yes.
And I've taken a few risks in life. One was moving to Nashville for nearly a decade. And I think that was a necessary part of my journey as well. I think that I could see this place for what it is better after I got a little distance and looked back at it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of good people here in the South. Most people here in the South are good until you piss them off, and then they're anything but.
Yeah.
And things work pretty well down here, so nobody really ever questions their belief system. They believe these things, and life is working out pretty good, so it confirms their belief system, and they never have a real reason to check it. But Nashville gave me a reason to check mine, partially because of having achieved a little bit of success and then starting at the bottom of the totem pole. All of my social credit, all of my musical accolades that I had managed to gather into a pile down here didn't transfer to Nashville. I was just another jackass with a guitar trying to make a little money to survive. But I did survive. And because of that, I found a way to thrive there. And being in the entertainment district 7 nights a week with a guitar in your hand and a spotlight on your face gives you an amount of example, a what's the word I'm looking for? Sample size far
Yes.
greater than I would have ever had I never left here. Playing on stages will give you an increased sample size, but Nashville had such turnover. Every night was a new crowd from all parts of the country and all parts. I called it the inverse of touring. I would
Yeah.
go 10 minutes from my house to sit down with my guitar, and the world would come to me. And that was a cool situation, man. It wasn't without its troubles, but I found a way to find a great deal of peace and make as much money as I needed to get by on and all those sorts of things. And but the real catalyst for my growth was the girl that I moved to Nashville with. When that first year's lease was over, she stayed on one side of town and I moved to the other. She was no longer, I was very much so interested in remaining with her, but she was no longer interested in remaining with me. And what followed was a bit of despair. All of a sudden, I had to question things. Part of Southern culture, my father passed in 2008. And when he passed that year, my parents would have been married for 34 years. And my grandparents, when my grandfather passed, they were married for pushing 70 years. I don't remember. I'd have to do some math.
Yeah.
But I'm currently at my grandmother's house. Whenever I get off the road and come home for a stay, I come to her house because there's always food, and I want to make sure that I get as much time with her as I can. She was a
Yeah.
very instrumental part in raising me. My family, we all live on the same little patch of land here, the way it's always been. And
Yeah.
this house is we can't remember exactly when it was built. We can't trace it to an exact year, but it's right around 100 years old. I'm sure you can tell by this old fireplace in the back that this isn't from this century, you know what I mean? But I believed that once you chose your mate, you stayed together. I'd watch my parents struggle through some things. We were lower middle class. We're not below the poverty line, but we can see it. You know what I mean? It's not that far away. I completely lost my train of thought there. I had a childhood memory flash through and just completely lost my flow. But I tightened it back into Nashville, just seeing so many different perspectives and absorbing those and exchanging a statistically significant amount of energy with so many people
Mm.
gave me a little better look at the world. And then that relationship ended, and I found myself with an amount of solitude that I didn't know existed. You know,
Mm.
down here, I've got family that's going to stop by at some point during the day, and I've got a lifetime's worth of friends and social credits and ex girlfriends and future girlfriends and all that. But in Nashville, I didn't have that. I
Yeah.
had a handful of acquaintances that I'd made and a couple of people that I could truly consider friend, but most were just colleagues that I'd worked with. And I could not understand how this wasn't working. This is supposed to be this way, but it's clearly not. What's wrong with my thinking? And that crack in my belief system allowed it to crumble and allowed me to rebuild it out of observation.
Mm.
And at this point, we're all seeing the entire world piped right into our eyeballs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And a lot happened in that. I moved to Nashville in 2012 and moved home in 21. And so the world went from being a relatively mundane, fairly peaceful place to being chaos in that time. Right
Yeah.
around the 2015, 2016 election, something changed, and we could debate on another show what that was, but something changed, and we became more afraid
Mm.
that people that didn't share our values and our belief systems were getting ahead in this world, and we couldn't have that. Things have been good for this long, and change is scary. The vitriol level went through the roof, and simultaneously, as a single guy in Nashville, the dating culture is going to hell with the advent of Tinder and those sorts of things. The game changed,
Yes.
and it got far more toxic
Mm.
in that scenario. Dudes in that time were promised more access to women through these digital devices, and women were promised they were promised choice.
Yeah.
And dudes got more access to see what was out there, but they did not get more access to hold what was out there. You know what I mean? And that spawned the whole incel movement. And I'm just observing all of this, trying to figure out what it is I know and what it is I don't know, because clearly I do not know everything. And the real catalyst for me, I'm in this state of kind of rebuilding my belief system, and this real catalyst. There was a bank teller there in Nashville that I'd go through the drive-through to deposit all my stripper money, which is what it looked like from tips coming in every night. And I pulled up at the drive-through, and there was this beautiful woman on the other side of it. And so I wrote her a little note and said, it was a parking receipt. And so I said, I'm sacrificing a tax write-off to tell you you're very pretty. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
And that sparked a little bit of banter. And the next thing, we ran into each other out one night at a little neighborhood pub there on the west side of Nashville where I lived. And for the next 3 days, that was pretty magical. And then that weekend came and went, and she ghosted me. And I thought, I was bamboozled by it because the weekend had gone so good. And I'm like, what in the world is happening here? Why is this happening? And so I'm caught between this space of, if I don't say, this was still new too. Like, this ghosting wasn't the common form at that
Right.
point. It was just starting to show its ugly face. And she ghosted me, and I thought, how can I handle this properly? And if I don't say anything, then I condone this really shitty behavior. But if I do, then I'm just a whiny little bitch. You know what I mean? So how do I? So I thought about it for a few days, and I came to this conclusion that there was only one way to handle it. So I told her, "Look, I know you're in a weird spot, right?" I texted her, "I know you're in a weird spot. If you get to a better spot in the future, or whatever your case may be, I'll be around. Hit me up then." And she immediately said, "Thank you" to me. And I thought, holy crap, I just cracked this code, man. I cracked it. And so I jumped on the internet to see if anybody else had crack the code, or if I was indeed the first one. And that led me to a space, man. That was the rabbit hole that I jumped into.
Yeah.
The next year, every day it was podcasts and lectures and would point me to this particular study or whatever the case may be. It took me first to pickup game. And these guys, they were getting some things right. I could see that this made logical sense, but they were also using these gross manipulation tactics. And it wasn't about finding love or a partner. It was about how many women can I take home?
Right.
And that wasn't the game that I wanted to play anymore. Now that I'd had my heart broken, I wasn't interested in doing that to anyone else. That led me into some psychology spaces, and that led me into evolutionary biology spaces. And Jordan Peterson, once upon a time, I think, was a vessel of information that could be debated now for sure. But I was watching his lectures and as that he used to post online, and that led me to Rogan. And Rogan had an evolutionary biologist on one day, and I was listening to this podcast, and that's when it dawned on me, man, if I start thinking about my behavior in the terms of what an animal needs and what an animal does, then holy crap, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And then I started, the closest people to me, I could see that hey, it makes sense if I apply that kind of thinking, that if I put that lens on and look at them, then all of a sudden everything they've ever done in their life, no matter how stupid, makes sense. You know what I mean? And same for me. And then same for this person and same for that person. And holy crap, this works on a societal level too. And then it dawned on me that that is the underlying current that moves the waters of time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I started. I'm on an elevated perch every night with a view into humanity. So I just started looking for confirmation, evidence to support, evidence to disprove. Is this stupid? I don't think it is, but let me go try to prove that it is. Because if I'm going to start talking like this, then I'm going to need to be able to back it up. And I had already taken on resident therapist at the bar that I worked out in downtown Nashville. The minute someone had trouble with their family or with their boyfriend or their girlfriend, they were looking for me. And I started using this language, and it started making a lot of sense to a lot of people. And I saw that it didn't always, but it could affect some positive change and a way for someone to go grab some self-esteem that they never had before, or a way for someone to see through the mask of the narcissist that they had never been able to do before,
Yes.
things of that nature. And the pain point for me was that every person that I would end up talking to about relationship struggles or family struggles or just generalized depression, I would have to give them all of this language that I wanted to use to discuss it. And then we could talk about their thing. So I remember in 2019, I was looking back at my financial records to see when is the slowest month of the year,
Yeah.
because I think I'm going to try to take that month off and focus strictly on writing this down so that I don't have to go from mile 0 to mile 15 anymore. I can say,
Right.
here, take this, soak this up, and then we'll talk. And then, of course, early 2020 rolled around and COVID hit. And all of a sudden, I went from trying to take a month off to having the whole year off. And so
Yeah.
I just walled myself off in my apartment, man, and tried to figure out what I needed to know about writing a book, which the more I learned, the more I figured out I didn't know. And so I wrote down an outline of what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it, and then I just went to work. And about that time, my laptop crapped out on me, and I wasn't making any money, so I didn't want to spend any money. So I wrote the whole thing to kick back on my bed with my in my notes app on my phone. And then the next 3 years were a struggle trying to figure out how to get a book published and move back home and restart my career and all that. So it was quite the journey, man. But it's allowed me to shine some light where it needs to be shined and open up a bridge to some inner peace for people, that myself included, that had not
Yep.
known that before. It's given me agency over my environment that I exist in, and agency over my mental environment
Yes.
that I exist in too. And a conscious designed for the life that I live, so that it's designed to bring me peace and fulfillment and joy, and not doesn't the tiniest little things don't get on my nerves every day,
Mhm.
because I don't take the 30 seconds it would require to fix that thing. And so my whole purpose now, man, is just try to amplify that message and teach people how to recognize themselves in the mirror.
Yeah,
Teach and constantly refine how I see myself in the mirror as well. It's more of
right.
a practice than a definite, because there's no way I'm not going to have a blind spot here or a blind spot there. Or the animal that I am isn't going to make a strong case for going after something that may or may not be good for me, or may waste time, may not be worth the effort, so to speak. I'm
Yeah,
just, like I said, I'm just trying to introduce the human and the animal to each other and facilitate communication, because the more these two can be on the same page, the more intentional you can be with your life, the more precise you can be with your decisions, and the more peace you can curate, the more fulfillment you can find, the more beauty you can find. You also see a little further into the darker sides, the ugliness and the evilness of that exist in our world. But you can quickly, I'm in charge of my mental health. Sometimes
yeah,
my algorithm thinks all I want to see is animal rescues, because I train it that way on purpose. I recognize that the mental environment's getting a little, the temperature's turning up or whatever, so I can go educate my algorithm on what I want to see. And then it pipes in a bunch of wild animal rescues and puppies being adopted. And next thing, the world's good again.
yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate all that. Thank you for
Yeah,
walking us
man.
through that journey. And a few questions that come up to me or come up for me immediately. You mentioned that you were able to go to Nashville and thrive, but coming from the South, how were you able to remain grounded? Because most people, when they move to a bigger city, it can be tough, right? You've got the
Yeah.
lights flashing in your face. You've talked about your beliefs. Did your beliefs play a huge role in helping you stay grounded and thrive in Nashville when you could have gone the other way?
I will say that as a trained animal, I was trained pretty well by the animals that came before me. I grew up, fortunately, in a house full of service animals. We show love to each other by doing things for each other. If I get up from the table and other people are finished, then it gives me a reward to pick their plate up as well, and cut the grass so my mom doesn't have to, and things of that nature. The animals around here that I grew up with in this den here were peaceful and loving, and pretty full of empathy as well. There was a devout belief around here that kind of permeates the South. That's another conversation that we may or may not need to have today. But so I was given a pretty good worldview. It was just small. It was the golden rule around
Mm,
here. It was do unto others, and it was take care of your neighbors, because that's how we do down here. If somebody
yeah,
dies in the South, that family's house is flooded with food almost immediately, because
yeah,
there are a lot of beautiful things about Southern culture. Not all of it's pretty, but there are a
yeah,
lot
of
of beautiful things about it.
course.
And so I was given a pretty good worldview, a pretty good one that allowed me to make friends and to understand my place in the world. And man, when service is your love language, you can make friends pretty easy. You know what I mean? So that was how I was thriving. And one of the other things I realized in Nashville, it's gotten better now, but the bars down in the entertainment district, they didn't pay artists or musicians a whole lot of money,
Hmm.
just enough to say that they paid us, but they didn't, not a whole lot at all. And so we would survive on the tips that we would get from the crowds that would come down to Nashville to go to Broadway and hear music. And it didn't take long for me to realize there are some people in here that blow me away, that are barely making any money. And there are other people that can't hold a candle to my level of talent, that are making more money than I am. And so it gave me the idea that it doesn't matter how good you are. It matters how good you make people feel. And that was a big turning point for me, because at that point, it was no longer about, hey, watch what I can do. It was, what do you want to hear, and how can I play it the best for you so that it makes you happy, because if you're happy, you're going to put more money in the bucket. And so it taught me how to, I honed my skill on really being able to connect with, to read a room and to really be able to connect with those people in front of me. And that was one thing that Nashville gave me that helped me thrive there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. About the heartbreak, and I've gone through similar experiences at different points in my life where you have this underlying belief system. And I almost look at it at times where I was naive, and it crashed my life too at times when I went through those experiences. And the way I've come to understand it, and I've talked to many friends who share the similar thoughts when it comes to that, is this whole notion that at some point you have to confront monsters in life. And there's that whole Nietzsche saying around, don't become a monster while you're confronting them, but learn from that, that there is evil out there, there's malevolence out there, but how can you learn from that? I think those experiences are powerful. I am curious, as you said, that heartbreak and then being ghosted by this other lady, how that shaped your perspective in life.
That was, like I said, those two were the main catalysts that kind of pushed me towards, let me stop and think about this. And given the upbringing that I have, I just couldn't ghost someone. But clearly, that is a thing, very clearly. And so, what would make somebody do that? And in that particular instance, it's not, it's the fear of confrontation that would make somebody choose that. And then to understand that even further, because I kept digging, it's a different experience on this planet being a male versus a female. I had an ex girlfriend of mine tell me in a deep conversation about this sort of things. She had some trouble in her childhood, and she said to me about herself and other women that it might be better if they had their eyes on the side of their head, like any other prey animal would in the animal kingdom. And that made me, we were talking about that very thing, but that was very just, that example grabbed me, that metaphorical image grabbed me. And confrontation for a man is something different than confrontation for women. They do it differently with other women, and it's probably best to be avoided with other men, because I'm not a violent person. Thankfully, I wasn't shown that example. I wasn't trained to be that way. I wasn't beaten on or abused in any way. I consider that one of my fortunes in this life. But some people have. And this particular girl's example of what a masculine animal is has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? I haven't had time to make any sort of real impression on her. She hasn't been able to digest who it is that I am. So she has no idea. For all she knows, I could be that stalker, or I could be that dangerous individual. I had to figure out how the girlfriend that decided we weren't going forward after that first year in Nashville, we loved each other. And we truly did for a particular amount of time. And I had to figure out how she, number one, she could go from loving me so intently to wanting to get away from me. And I had to figure out why I had been the guy who had no options for partners, all the options for partners, and then back to no option for partners again. Because I had to figure that out, because that was painful, man. I enjoy the company of an emotionally healed and intelligent woman.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out how to spot that crap in the wild so I didn't get bit another time. And those were some of the things that, some of the questions I was trying to answer as I was coming to this light bulb that helped me answer these questions and helped me try to help heal it when I find it, or understand when I can't, and head the other way. Just get out of that, the path of that particular animal, because
Yeah.
there's trouble. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. And then another thing you shared that really stood out to me is, as you were sharing, you were the emotional lighthouse for people. And one of the things I've realized in the therapeutic space when I'm working with many people, you get to learn a lot about people. And your experience is similar. Like you said, the tour was coming to you. So you saw a wide array of people. What were some common themes that you were identifying when you were talking to these individuals, or what you were seeing in the people you were interacting with? You've touched on fear, but what are these other impulses that are driving people? And I do want to come back to that inner animal piece, but yeah, what are the common
Um,
themes?
a lot of it was just low level depression. Most of the people that were in Nashville were treating it as an escape from their mundane life that they had built back home, from the repetitive day in and day out, same old. And when they were in Nashville, another common theme was they were busy poisoning themselves. Alcohol is a very dangerous substance is that
Yeah.
is really grown to be invisible in
Yes.
our society. And I don't have anything against alcohol. I've made a living in bars and restaurants and theaters and that sort of thing, and I've been around it. But what it does do is it lowers the human element, and it lets the animal drive a little harder, sometimes completely. That's why drunk people, they're either feeding, fighting, or the other F. You know what I mean? That's what they're in the mood for when they're wasted drunk. But so I would get more of the story in those situations. And I don't know if you've ever been adjacent to the service industry world, but that's being a musician in a bar is pretty adjacent to the service industry world. And a lot of times it attracts, this is not everyone, of course, but this is a prevalent percentage of that population.
Yeah.
Well, there's some alliteration for you. A prevalent percentage of that population. It attracts impulsive people because it's fast cash and it's around booze and there's no drug test and a lot of times and stuff like that. And so you get people that are Hunter S. Thompsoning their way through life on substances and a prayer. And those people, they're super interesting people to know because one minute they are surfing a high wave and another minute they're crawling out of a dumpster somewhere. And so the relationship troubles in those worlds are vast. They are many. And so I would hear a lot of those situations and people looking for clarity. And sometimes they want to be heard. They want to be able to bark for a little bit, but they don't want solution. And that was frustrating until I figured out, oh, okay, we're just listening today. We're not solving, we're listening, which is a nice tool to have in the romantic toolbox as well. I'll ask my girl now, do you desire sympathy or do you desire a solution? Because I can offer either one.
Right.
Just let me know what you're in the mood for
Yeah.
and I'll cook some up for you. There was a lot of times I would see people who had lost someone that they really loved in their life from reckless behavior. And they would be so broken over that loss, yet they were busy repeating that behavior.
Yeah.
That was a real common thing. And it makes perfect sense to me now, but that was one of
Hmm.
the things I was trying to figure, how is this possible? This person is busy telling me that this particular thing, this behavior, this substance, this whatever is no good for you and it killed the love of my life and I'm completely broken over that and still do the thing. So I had to figure out how that was possible and now I can understand it. Now I can see it's more the rule than it is the exception. And it's because it's the default setting more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
those are just some of the things. No other ones jump to the front of my mind quickly.
yeah. Yeah. And you talk about the inner animal and the mixed impulses that we have as humans. I would like you to expand on that. And I am curious, as you've shared with me before, why the animal is there, right? Why is the animal there? And how do you bring that harmony, especially when, as you were
Yeah.
touching on earlier, when you're making decisions and how these impulses are getting in the way?
Yeah. That's the first thing is to recognize that it's even there. That was the first thing for me, especially because there are times when statistically and based on metrics, life is going pretty good, but we feel unmotivated or we feel even worse, depressed. Life is objectively pretty good. I got a roof over my head, food in the fridge, and all these things that once upon a time we wouldn't have had access to. I for one, appreciate being in the South. I appreciate refrigeration and climate control. But and despair inside of relationships, there are a litany of things that we could talk about, but it's important to recognize it's there because if you don't know it's there, you can't get to know it. You can't understand what motivates it, why it wants to chase this particular rabbit or this particular squirrel or whatever the case may be. And for me, I'll give you an example from my own life. As far as music goes, like this is not an easy path. Nobody in my family, I have a few people in my family that can sing and a couple here and there that could play an instrument, but nobody had made a career out of it. Nobody had become a professional. It was all just hobby stuff. And so here I am out here making a profession out of it with no template. You know, the only the pieces of templates that I can gather from the universe, from the internet and stories that I hear, but it's not the path of least resistance for me. But here I am doing it anyway. And so, of course, I wanted to go figure out why I was chasing this musical rabbit and make sure it was still serving a purpose. It was still bringing me peace and a rabbit worth chasing. And I had in my family, music, everybody loves music. So we'd listen to the radio. And when I'm a toddler in the back of my parents' car, and I started growing up and loving to listen to music on the radio. It made me feel good. And I'd be in the back seat singing my little butt off, and nobody would tell me to shut up. You know what I mean? Which is a beautiful thing. And then at one point in my life, for about a decade, I had an uncle who could play guitar a little bit. And I was fascinated by it. And I started noticing all the adults think my Uncle Bruce is real cool because he can play guitar. So that might be a way that all these adults could think that I'm cool. So in the beginning, it was I can get attention from adults with this. You know what I mean? I can get pats on the back. And my grandmother has a piano here that belonged to my great grandmother. And so I sat down on the bench and started trying to pick out songs that I'd heard on the radio. And of course, that led to attention and that led to some piano lessons. And then when I learned that it could get me attention from girls, it was once I learned that I was an animal and there was an animal in me that was motivated by certain beliefs and certain where I found rewards and where I found fulfillment, those sorts of things that I had been
Mhm.
trained. It was important for me to go back and analyze that. And I was talking about being exposed to a musical person early in my life and realizing that could get me some attention and some social status, not and the fact that I was fascinated by it
Yes.
already and it was rewarding, then hey, this is a worthy rabbit to chase. And so I started chasing it. And to this day, it brings me a hell of a lot of fulfillment and a lot of music to me can become a meditation. It can let me think deeper than anything in this. Sometimes I'm on stage, but I'm 1,000 miles away
Yeah.
here because I'm so deep in a thought somewhere. But understanding that it's there and then being able to ask it, why do we like this? Why is this considered good in our world? If we have a bad habit, we can figure out where that came from and that helps us undo it. It might not solve it and you might not be able to turn it off like that. But when you find our behavior is just a symptom of who we are as a animal. The motivations that we get from emotions, and we get those emotions from the things in our environment, whether they're in our physical environment or whether they're in our digital environment that we're soaking up from the web. We see things, we hear things, we touch, taste, smell things that we either or disgust us or make us run away or make us want to fight, those sorts of things. So if I know the belief system that the training that I hold as an animal, the training of this is good and this is bad and this is scary and this is dangerous but good or this is safe, those types of things that we learn from those animals that come before us. If I know why the animal believes that, because that's been my example, then I can look for evidence to prove or disprove that. And I can calibrate my own belief system just by understanding, knowing the animal that I am and understanding why it's motivated the way it's
Yes.
motivated and the way that it navigates its environment, which is biological senses. That's all. My aunt that lives around the corner, she has a small dog. His name is Bear, and me and Bear have a real tight relationship. And sometimes I think literally think about what he's thinking, and he's not really thinking, but how if he can't think, then how can he how does he know that it's a good thing to come to
Right.
grandma's house? Because he busts in the door and he goes immediately to the kitchen island that we usually eat at around here and looks around the base of it to see if anybody dropped any crumbs. How does he know that? How does he know? And so I realized when I had this light bulb go off that I operate the same
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I go to grandma's house too because there's
Oh,
always food there. I said that in the beginning of this podcast. And he knows when he comes in this joint that there's probably going to be a crumb or two that somebody
right.
missed. And it's fascinating and an endless source of curiosity for me to try to think because we're in the South, we have dogs. I was born into a house with dogs in it. I feel a kindred spirit with those animals. I've often been curious about why they're so loving, what motivates them to do that, and how in general they navigate. And it's a real beautiful thing to
Yeah,
watch Mother Nature do her
for
thing,
sure.
man.
Yeah. Well,
So I got on such a tangent. I can't remember if I
well,
answered
no,
your question
I
or
do want to
not.
come back to it for sure. I do want to reflect something because you're talking about under the influence of alcohol, people will want to engage in the three F's, right? Whether it's feeding themselves, fighting, or the other F, as you shared. All of that is survival based. And I think our
Right?
emotions are a reflection of wanting to survive or continue
Yeah.
to procreate,
Yeah.
survive our species, whether it's fear, anger, whatever it is. And that's where I think that inner animal comes in. And as you're sharing, there is that reason of
Yeah. In
understanding why
instinct
it's
and
there.
emotion.
But also, I do want to explore with you how it is showing up in society today. Because as humans, I think we can easily fall into that trap of desiring power, which can initially be a form of survival, but then it goes too far, right? And you hear about it in so many
Right.
stories where it's
Right.
taken too far and it could show up as tyranny. But what are you seeing in society today? And do you think that interaction is in
Um,
harmony?
yeah, to your point you were just making, the thing that is driving that Mother Nature requires of us is to survive and reproduce. And power, as much as it is control, it's also access to the opposite
Yes.
sex, social status, the whole dynamic between the masculine animal and the feminine animal in its natural state. You and I can go into that if you want to. I should say very clearly that nat, natural is a bad choice of words, but we can go into that and I don't want to get sidetracked by that tangent. But all right, let me I saw a potential pitfall there and it
Well, let's
sidetracked
just
me.
go. Let's talk about this pit.
Okay, let's come back to that because I really want to
Yeah.
talk about that too. As far as the animal goes, in nature, you're going to find male animals and female animals breeding, and the population
Yeah.
continues. It seems like to me that none of us, you or I, neither one is 100% masculine, and nobody seems to be 100% feminine. To be 100% masculine is going to be cold and calculating and results driven, and logic is the gasoline in the tank that
Yeah.
moves it, right? Logic and reason and the desire for power because power brings more access to more females, which Mother Nature requires of me to make sure that my seed gets into the next generation and the species continues, right? That's it in a very boiled down
Yeah.
nutshell. And so the feminine animal is she's going to be vulnerable while she's pregnant and she wants to be able to ensure that those offspring grow into adulthood so they can sexually reproduce. That's what Mother Nature requires of her. And so her angle is a little different than the masculine. To be 100% feminine is to be 100%
Mhm.
intuitive, not calculating at all, but very much so intuitive. And I think it's the balance of those two things that make the
Yes.
world go round. But the fact is, none of us are 100% on either end of the spectrum. I think I said in the book, we sapiens have found all sorts of ways to muddy the
Yes.
water, and it exists to various degrees of gray. And as far as I can tell, that's
Yeah.
okay. It's always gonna be that way. It's probably always been that way, even though it was looked down upon and probably not it probably existed, but it just wasn't talked
Yeah.
about. Fortunately, the world we live in today offers more freedom to be authentic with who you are on the inside. It's not without its battles, though. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
and I just wanna add to
Um,
that because we see the protective mechanisms come out too, and I agree with you. I think that tendency for power to continue to procreate and, as you say, spread your seed. But I think there's that aspect of jealousy too that drives us because what I've come to
right.
understand from a biological standpoint is for men, it's really important to make sure they're not raising someone else's offspring. They want to raise their own. And for women, it's
Exactly.
they want to make sure they're getting protection and being provided for from a single
Right.
male, right?
I think that's probably the contract that marriage was
Yes.
designed to alleviate that problem,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that struggle for power is definitely there are also examples of evil people in this world that perhaps were so hurt and abused as young animals that the way they feel good is abusing and
Yeah.
hurting others. That's another motivation for power that I can see. The way that you asked, the way I see it showing up at a societal level. And there's one very clear example to me. The animal is Mother Nature requires us to be scared of things because fear is a big aid in our survival. We need to know whether we can eat this thing or we need to
Yeah.
run from it, and how fast do we need to run. And so fear, it's a very quick chemical dose that we get when we're encountered with some sort of threat. I don't have to if there's a man with a gun there, I don't have to think about, okay, how what's the distance? How fast does that bullet travel? I just need
Yeah.
to run. Or a swarm of killer bees or whatever thing you can think of that would be a legitimate threat. And so the animal response is very quick. The animal's quicker than the human because it doesn't require calculation or diagnostics or anything. It's just a reaction. And so I'm not certain who knows it. I'm not certain if anybody knows it, how I see the animal lens playing out in societal wise. And one of the main things that I see is fear and outrage drives
Mhm.
engagement. I'm not sure if that was found out by accident or if they knew it all along, the powers that be, but the animal and its ability to be hacked is definitely being weaponized
Yeah.
against us. We're in division sows, right? It's politicians and those talking head type of people that have access to an audience to say, hey, look over here. Here's something to be scared of. And they're going to fire people up to get them scared of it, to move the herd this way so that it votes a particular way or it gives money a particular way or whatever the case may be. Our animal brains were just never, they were never meant to soak up this level of information, the amount of information, one, but number two, the velocity in which we
Yes.
can obtain that information. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty commonly accepted that we existed in small groups of 100 to
Yes.
150 people. And that's going to be about all you know of the world for your entire life if you exist in that time period. We certainly weren't meant to be able to peer into the kitchens and the bedrooms of 8.5 billion people and have that pumped into our eyes, our biological sense, and our ears at light speed. We certainly weren't designed for that. And I think it's not all detrimental to us, but a lot of it is. And that type of content captures people. And not only does it capture them and cause that emotion, but then it says, hey, here's the path to follow to get further down that space. And the uptick in violence, the uptick in rhetoric, all of that is, if I was telling you
Yep.
about Bear earlier, Bear has a wonderful existence because everybody wants to love on him and scratch on him. When he's going to go find a lap to sit in because that person's going to pet him. And that makes him a wonderful little being that just spreads love. But if his life existed of someone yelling at him, starving him, kicking him, whipping him, and all that, he's not going to love people. His example is going to have shown him that these things are a
Yeah.
potential threat. Stay away from them. If they come close to you,
Yep.
bite them. And that in particular is playing out on essentially a worldwide scale now. I know it's playing out in the
Yes.
United States, and I think that I see enough evidence of it playing out
I
worldwide. But it's if I feed the animal that I am that toxic diet, that toxic digital diet at light speed of vitriolic and negative and fear mongering digital diet, then I'm eventually going to become
Yep.
that animal that doesn't see the good in anyone, that doesn't love anyone, who doesn't love myself anymore because I don't recognize myself, and all the things that once made me happy don't exist in my world because I've barked and bit long enough that all those things have gone
Yep.
away. I don't want to wind up in that. I'm not going to wind up in that space. I can promise you that because I have conscious agency over the human can say, "Hey, you're watching too many political videos."
Yep.
You know what I mean? And retrain the algorithm. The human that I am, if I have just maybe I've been on a rough schedule and I'm worn down, and the animal that I am doesn't want to go outside and play. It wants to mope around the house and feel sorry for itself. Then the human in me with the higher funk with logic and reason and empathy and morality and math and science and all these upper level human tools can say, hey, you're feeling sorry for yourself, and turn my head towards all the things I should be
Yes.
gracious of. And can drag the animal out of the house to go do some sort of act of service, because ultimately that's going to make me feel I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to go do anything, but I'm going to pick the animal up and take it to this place, and it's going to do the thing, and all of a sudden its tail's going to be wagging. So I have conscious direction and conscious manipulation over my own mental environment. And dude, that
Yes.
saves me, man, because the everything else in the world is trying to scare me and trying to rob me of my attention and trying to sell me cheap dopamine, everything in the world. And so if I can recognize those environments and steer clear of them when I need to, then that makes for a
Yeah.
much more peaceful life.
Absolutely.
And that's if there's a gift that I'm trying to give,
Mhm.
it's that. It's that the world is a cesspool of ideas and emotions and gratitude and toxicity. It's all there. It's all there. So if we can spot those things from a distance, we can move ourselves in that space and not just have to take whatever onslaught of bull crap is coming our way. And also, another important thing is if another animal barks at me, I don't have to bark
Yeah.
back anymore. There's going to be a time where I get in somebody's way because I didn't see them coming. I might have stepped on their toes verbally and didn't realize it because of some sort of blind spot that I have. And the instinct when there's an animal barking at you is to bark back, to stand your ground. To he thinks he's tough. I'm going to show him how tough I am. And the escalation that follows, and the next thing there's some sort of trouble that was just
Mhm.
unnecessary. And but the human that I am can say, "Oh, sorry, man, I was in your way. I know you're mad at me. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you mad at me. I'm gonna go this way.
Yeah.
Have a nice day." And that turning the other cheek vibe that we get preached to, that it only works if you don't carry away that negative emotion
Yeah.
with you. You know what I mean? If it costs you energy to turn the other cheek, then it's still
Right.
a negative. Like I'm on the road a lot. I'm in between Lower Alabama where I live and Nashville, and then I'm all over the country. Fortunately, I don't have to do that driving, but I have to drive that back and forth from Alabama. And there are days where I make a mistake and I might cut somebody off in traffic. And there are other days where somebody most definitely cuts me. They did something that could have caused us both to
Yeah.
crash. And that road rage thing, I've seen this example. Somebody getting cut off and getting mad, and then coming home and being mad in their environment with their wife and their daughter and their son, causing these other animals bad emotions because, oh, dad, you better stay away from dad because he's
Yeah.
in a bad mood. But now that I recognize that I'm an animal, I get cut off in traffic. I'm assuming that person was on their phone and just didn't see me. And I'm not going to walk away from that interaction with toxicity flowing through me. I'm going to meet that
Yeah.
with some empathy. There's going to be a time where I'm not going to see somebody and I'm going to piss somebody else off. So let me just It sounds a little bit passive whenever I say it, but the power is in not being emotionally affected by things that I have no way to control.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely.
I'm saying? And that allows me to walk away from a lot of places with a lot of peace and my environment not being able to
Yeah,
destroy that peace in
for
a split
sure.
second.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you were talking about the fear earlier too, I think evolutionarily wise, I think we're wired to be territorial, right? So then if you get the narrative that here's someone who's an outsider who has different views, then that is someone to be feared. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of that polarization, which brings me to the other question. Or
I
yeah,
couldn't agree
but the
more.
harmony, creating that harmony. And you touched on devout beliefs earlier, and we didn't get into it. But how much do you think devout beliefs can help in finding that harmony?
I have seen quite a bit of evidence that belief in a higher power can facilitate someone's peace and
Yeah,
harmony and can destroy someone's peace and harmony. A lot of it has to do with exactly how that belief in that higher power was shown to you as you're an early animal and the belief system that follows that. I've seen people use belief in a higher power to raise up humanity, and I've seen people use that belief to
yes,
destroy portions
yeah.
of humanity. As far as I can tell, it's probably always been that way, and it's probably always going to be that way. So I've actually thought about that quite a bit. Do we have time? Is there a time
Oh,
limit on what we're doing?
let's go.
Because this might open up a whole nother. But I've actually thought about it. I'll be plain and direct. I don't know what happens next. There's no way for me to use logic and reason and evidence and statistically repeatable analysis or any of those scientific, higher functioning, repeatable type of experiments to tell me what comes next after I take my
Yeah.
last breath in this world. And I'm okay with that uncertainty. I'm okay with it. It what it does for me is it allows all possibilities to
Yes.
remain. And so I can be curious about what's next. I don't have to put all my chips on the table and then fight anyone that says they're in the wrong
Right.
place. You know what I mean? I said earlier that I was raised by loving service animals, and like I say, I consider that a fortune in my world. It's all we do around here is just try to
Yeah.
serve each other, do something to keep someone else from having to do it. Or I come home a lot because my family's old now, and my dad and my grandfather are gone. I come home and I might spend 5 hours on a lawnmower cutting the little piece of property that we have on the edge of town, but that's an awesome thing for me to do because that's me loving my grandmother. That's me loving my mom. Man, I lost my train of thought. I was thinking about how bad the grass. I was looked outside and saw the grass, and it's probably another couple days I'll be riding that lawnmower again. What jumped me back off again right before I went on the
Yeah, I
grasping
think the
adventure?
animals also gets distracted easily too, right? But no, I
It certainly does,
no, I
man.
think it's just, and that's fitting because that is what happens if you're not in harmony. You do get distracted, and it's
Oh yeah,
coming
harmony.
back to
That's
the
it.
higher power. I think,
Yeah, yeah. Down here, especially where I'm from, we're given religion as we come in this world. And there are different levels of practicing religious
yeah,
people down here. Devout Christians, backsliding Christians. If you're from the South, you'll know that word, backsliding. Oh, I was talking about being trained by other service animals, loving animals. And that's me. I don't intend to cause any harm in this world. Sometimes I'm going to, and I'm going to own that, and I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to adjust my behavior so that I don't have to cause anybody else any pain. But thanks for pointing that out to me. I'm going to reflect on why I did that, or if I just didn't see the possibility of hurting somebody's feelings, I'm going to reflect on how I can see that possibility in the future. A lot of people, though, I would see people who are just good people would give you the shirt
I
off of their
think,
back. but also could be the most hateful sons of bitches I've ever
Yeah.
seen. You know what I'm saying? And use language that they would never use, but all of a sudden they're using it. And it was the animal motivating that behavior. Anger brings out the worst in people a lot of times. It brings out the most vicious defense. And the animal, based on its level of aggression that it thinks is necessary in conflict, it might show you its teeth, it might bark, it might bite. I don't know. But I had to figure out how to determine whether I should have an open conversation about religion with someone who, if I should most definitely not, who was searching for a broader perspective and who was closed off to a broader perspective. I think religion can serve people, especially in the South. There's a real sense of community around the church, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Like I said, man, if somebody died, the day my dad died, this house was filled up with more food than we could have eaten in a lifetime. And a lot of that was people that know folks around here from the church or whatever. My family's been in the same community for quite a while, so it was a mixture of the church bringing food and just the community in general bringing food. But where I see it being a huge detriment is critical thinking is not necessarily encouraged inside of those. It's trust the
Yeah.
authority. You know what I'm saying? Jesus and God being that authority. We're taught down here that we can't possibly understand God's
Mhm.
plan for us and that we should pray about it, that everything's already been determined, but we should pray to God that He would maybe edit some of that screenplay that is our life. You know what I mean? Agency is stripped out. We're a miserable sinner, and we have to spend our life apologizing for being that miserable sinner. Is that right? I don't know. I don't have any evidence to support that it is or to support that it isn't. You know what I'm saying? But as far as what's rewarded in
Yeah.
this lifetime and what the next life could possibly be. But a lot of people that I encounter, especially down here, they're so steeped in their own animal training, in their own identity, in their own belief system that they never pause for a second to question, "Eh, is that right? Is it wrong? Is it beneficial or is it detrimental?" And I see a lot of folks that if they could unlock the steel trap that is their very closely guarded beliefs and absorb some other examples and maybe look at it from a different perspective, they could adjust their existence, their path in this life to better
Mhm.
suit them a little bit. And so I see the refusal of any other alternative to be able to hold two ideas simultaneously to make them look at each other
Yeah.
and see which one holds water. I see that refusal a lot in the animal because
Yeah.
change is difficult. It's often painful to have a crack in your belief system, to have to admit that you're wrong about something, you've been wrong about something your entire life. To have to admit that it feels like shame. It feels akin to betrayal. It feels akin to embarrassment and ignorance. And so a lot of times defense of that belief system, no matter how irrational, no matter how cognitively biased, defense has to be there and it has to be
Mhm.
ferocious. And I'm hoping to some degree that this message that I'm trying to amplify will maybe let just enough light in there to maybe get a little speck of light on something, and maybe that'll lead to the curiosity that makes them motivated to
Yeah.
open the door, to actually look inside there and see what's in there and what's collecting dust and what's still a well-oiled
Yes,
machine.
I agree with you. Curiosity is what allowed our species to evolve and be open to doing things differently. If our ancestors hadn't done that, then they wouldn't have survived. So I agree with you,
Right.
Leslie. Thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate.
Yeah, man, I
Yeah, well, I
thoroughly enjoyed it.
appreciated your time and coming on and sharing your story and how you see the world. Really appreciate all of that. Now, for listeners that want to learn more about your work, your book, what are some ways they can find all that?
Okay. The title of the book is called Tracking Our Inner Animal, a next level understanding of what it means to be human. The purpose of it is to let's take the human and the animal and turn them towards each other and facilitate some
Yeah.
communication and some understanding and some forgiveness and some love
Hmm.
between the two. I have a Instagram page called Human Animal Theory. Oh, the book is available on Amazon. It's also there is a link, an Audible for the audiobook. Same name. Just search that. It'll take you there. Tracking Our Inner Animal. If you like the way my voice sounds, I'll read it to you. A funny thing, man, I've gotten a lot more compliments on my speaking voice than I think I ever have on my singing
There
voice.
you go.
And I just giggle at it. And my Instagram handle is Leslee Jackson Hall, Leslee Jackson Hall. There on Instagram. I have a Facebook page too. If they just, man, if you desire to get in connection, shoot me a message. I'm at the beginning of this journey. So the more people I can talk to, the better I can calibrate. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put all of that in the show notes. But thank you again, Leslie. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
yeah, man. Thanks for having me, brother.